Bolivian officers accused the OAS of a hand on a shallow audit that led to the 2019 coup d'etat. Latin American athletes are performing at their best at Tokyo's 2020 Paralympic Games. After 20 years of military occupation in Afghanistan, the United States removes itself from a troubled country under Taliban rule amid clashes with remnants of Penshir militia and the new faction of ISIS. From the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, I am Ray Gomez. This is from the South. We begin with the news. The comptroller and Auditor General of Bolivia, Henry Ara, stated that the Organization of American States failed to review the voting acts of the 2019 general elections and therefore did not carry out an audit but just a sampling. The official said that in breach of its agreement with the government, the OAS submitted a report based entirely on speculation and did not provide sufficient evidence. Such agreement established that the OAS was required to state the verification of the 35,000 voting acts. The Auditor General pointed out that the publication of the document precipitated a trigger for the armed forces to become subordinate and consequently to break the constitutional order, which led to a coup with serious consequences for Bolivia.
Given the nature of the agreement the OAS signed with Bolivia, the type of audit carried out following the agreement signed was a special one. The assignment that Bolivia had at that time was to carry out an audit, and this is what the agreement that was made public stated about the final tally, about the statistics, the verification of the voting acts. When we evaluated the report, the audit did not include these elements, so the OAS did not comply with the agreement that Bolivia made with them.
The Bogota Supreme Court refrained from holding the indictment hearing of former Army General Mario Montoya Uribe for his alleged responsibility in cases of extrajudicial executions at the hands of the military forces better known in Colombia as false positives. According to the ruling by Judge Fabio David Bernal, the Colombian prosecutor's office has a limited power to make charges before judges in Montoya Uribe's case due to the fact that the former military officer in October 2018 availed himself of a special jurisdiction for peace, a justice mechanism created following the peace agreement between the government and the FARC militia signed in September 2016. After learning of the judge's decision, lawyer Sebastián Escobar, on behalf of the victims of false positives, asked the magistrate to revoke the decision because he considered that this restricted the possibility of access to justice for his defendants. Human rights organizations in El Salvador are calling on members of Congress to pass a series of laws to shed a light on the forced disappearances that occurred in the country during the Civil War period and currently. The organizations have asked the government to create a law that rules the absence due to disappearance. They demanded the creation of a single registry of missing persons, which goes hand in hand with the search law, with the required strictness in international terms. In a document presented to the legislators, they state that only this year the number of missing persons has increased by 112% compared to the same period last year. Studies provided by the Public Prosecutor's Office and the Central American Institute of Research for Development and Social Change assured that annually the murder rate in the country is over 100 people per 100,000 inhabitants. Similarly, Salvadorian justice owes a debt to the 75,000 dead and the 8,000 disappeared left by the Civil War between 1980 and 1992. Judge Miguel Ángel Galvez sent two retired Guatemalan soldiers to trial under genocide charges and crimes against humanity for the Ixil genocide. The two accused of retired army members are Benedicto Lucas and Manuel Callejas. The resolution by which Galvez ordered the trial process validates almost 200 testimonies, 148 forensic reports, plus scientific, military, and historical documents that confirm the massacre of approximately 1,731 people. For the Association of Justice for the Reconciliation and the Human Rights Office of the Archbishop of Guatemala, the judge's action abides the right of the victims to the truth. Garcia and Callejas were already sentenced to 58 years in prison for the disappearance of the child Marco Antonio Molina Tizon and for the rape of his sister in 2018. Judge Galvez's resolution seeks to pursue those who participated actively in the spiral forced displacements, sexual violations, tortures, and disappearances of thousands of Mayan families during the government of General Romeo Lucas between 1978 and 1982.
And see here that in another fragment it says to all prisoners of war. I believe it says that then all prisoners of war were armed guerrillas who were apprehended. It sounded odd that those 10 people who arrived that night, none of them carried a firearm. They were all farmers and workers from different places. Sure, they were going to catch people only for the sake of catching them, and since he took people to his students only so he could teach them how to torture, because that's what he did, that is documented. That is why in this hell they held up so many people and why they buried so many of them. This is what is being explained, see?
Political instability and lack of consensus to rule in Haiti continues. A country severely struck by social crisis that worsens more due to the impact of the earthquake and the passing of recent storms. Mechanized kidnapping, rapes, massacres, political and religious pursuit. There is the day-to-day of many Haitians, while the country's political elite tests out models looking for a national agreement to govern. At least 4 groups have emerged with initiatives that prioritize the fight against corruption, the strengthening of the judiciary branch, and the optimization of the electoral system, with little regard for health and social support or plans to reduce the outburst of violence that affects the country. Prime Minister Ariel Henry's government lacks the support of opposing sectors that only see unfulfilled promises amid a humanitarian crisis that has affected over 650,000 people. The president of Ecuador, Guillermo Lasso, completed 100 days in office in the midst of popular discontent due to the rise in fuel prices, as well as the budget cuts applied in universities. The right-wing president focused his administration efforts to score a first significant triumph by fulfilling his promise to immunize against COVID-19 to some 9 million Ecuadorians, 60% of the population. However, several opponents objected to Lasso's economic agenda, which includes the privatization of state resources in the oil sector, expansions in mining, and labor reform. Since lack of work is Ecuadorians' #1 concern, it remains to be seen whether the head of states will be able to remedy a scenario where only 32% of the active labor force is working full-time and earning at least the minimum wage. We'll be right back after this very short break. Welcome back, and let's make a brief review of Tokyo's 2020 Paralympic Games, where Latin American athletes are performing at their best. From Venezuela, Linda Perez won the nation's first gold medal in this edition. Perez clocked 12:05 seconds for a personal best in the finals of the 100 meters T11. The young athlete thus becomes the second gold medal winner for Venezuela in the history of the Paralympic Games. China's Li Keqiang came in second for silver with a time of 12:15 seconds. We stay in the tracks. Cuba's Omara Duran won her sixth Paralympic gold medal. Duran's latest triumph came in the 400 meters in the T12 category. Omara is considered the face of Cuban Paralympic athletes after winning 3 gold medals at Rio 2016 and 2 at London 2012. In Tokyo 2020, she has once again added to her legendary status by beating her record after 10 years undefeated. Duran's gold medal was the second medal secured by Cuba at Tokyo 2020 after young athlete Rubiel Sol won in the long jump T46. In other news, Greek Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis reshuffles his cabinet in the wake of popular outcry of government's management of the wildfires that ravaged the country in summer. According to the Prime Minister's office, a new civil protection ministry will include responsibility for the fire brigade and will be helmed by Evangelos Apostolakis, a retired admiral who previously served as Minister of Defense. The ministries of Health, Citizen Protection and Tourism were reshuffled. Panagiotis Theodorakis, a former Minister of Interior for Mitsotakis, will lead the Citizen Protection Ministry. Thousands of hectares of forests were destroyed by fires that burned 4 days across Greece in August, forcing thousands of people to flee the flames and destroying thousands of homes and businesses. In a bid to refuse growing public anger and delays and breakdowns in the government's response, Mitsotakis apologized and promised that mistakes would be rectified. The reshuffle comes a few days before Mitsotakis outlines his economic policy for next year in an annual address at the opening of International Trade Fair in Thessaloniki. Northern Nigerian officials have called for central government help after the surrender in recent months of 3,000 people, including hundreds of Boko Haram members and others living under jihadist rule. Nigeria's military has cited the development in the 12-year-long conflict as evidence that they are succeeding against the group. But the fighters and their families started coming in after Boko Haram chief Abubakar Shekau was killed during a fighting with rivals from Islamic State West Africa province in May. Many who had surrendered were women, children, and farmers who had been forced to work in what was Boko Haram-controlled territory. The Institute of Water and Environment of the Argentinian province of Corrientes announced that the hydrological state of Paraná and Uruguay rivers sets alarms as their depth is currently 3 meters below the normal line. In its weekly report, the National Institute of Water affirms that the Paraguayan Argentinian segment of the Paraná registered an average of 7,260 cubic meters per second, a number that strikes inferior to those of recent years. On a similar note, the Paraná-Paraguay River recorded a weekly increase of 0.3 meters, which represents an almost 2-meter drop below the normal levels. The situation causes maximum alert among experts and authorities due to the abrupt loss of waters. Hurricane Ida swept through Louisiana, leaving severe damages to infrastructure, floods in city streets, and at least 2 people dead. Many affected people were left without homes after the pass of Hurricane Ida, which at the time of hitting the coast of Louisiana was a Category 4 storm. The event left the city of New Orleans mostly without electricity, and the residential housing sector suffered heavy blows that left many people unsheltered. The governor of the southeastern state, John Bell Edwards, informed that rescue teams are deployed throughout the jurisdiction to find any more victims and begin recovery operations after assessing the general damages. Floodwaters rose across northeastern India, where hundreds of thousands of people are stranded on the roofs of their homes or have fled to higher ground as more torrential rain fell. Incessant downpours for more than a week forced by Brahmaputra and other major rivers to burst their banks across Assam and Bihar states. Up to 2 meters of water have submerged many villages, as experts stated that annual floods are getting worse because of climate change. The floods have also threatened a UNESCO World Heritage listed reserve that is home to the largest concentration of one-horned rhinos. Tens of thousands of people are stuck in villages cut off by the floods, and the state government said more than 400,000 had been moved to higher ground.
Floods create havoc every year here. The water level has been high for more than a week. We usually take shelter in relief camps, but there is a huge scarcity of drinking water. We have not received much help from the authorities and others so far. There is one area of raised land, but it is not big enough for so many villagers. So we are really suffering.
We have more stories coming up after this financial break. Welcome back. Taliban fighters fired their guns into the air in celebration in Kabul as the United States completed the withdrawal of its forces from Afghanistan. Marine General Fred McKenzie, the head of the U.S. Central Command, made the withdrawal announcements at the Pentagon news briefing after the last troops sent to evacuate Americans and Afghans at risk flew out of Kabul airport. The Taliban hailed the departure of U.S. troops, describing it as a historic moment and declaring that Afghanistan was now fully independent. The final flight took place under heavy security following 2 attacks on the 2-week evacuation, where a suicide bombing left more than 100 people dead, including 13 U.S. troops. Taliban leaders walked victorious through Kabul airport, flanked by guards dressed in Special Forces combat kit, inspecting destroyed United States helicopters. Their newfound American arsenal is likely not limited to small arms, as the group captures sizable stockpiles of weapons and vehicles held as strongholds when controlled by U.S.-backed forces, including modern mine-resistant vehicles. Ensuring the security of Kabul's Hamid Karzai International Airport is a key issue, and the Taliban have repeatedly said they would not accept any foreign military presence in Afghanistan.
We have a message to any possible invader that anyone who looks to Afghanistan with bad intentions, they will face what the United States has faced today. The Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan wants good relations with the U.S. through diplomacy. However, the U.S. failed here. They failed. From the military perspective, they failed to achieve their goals. But the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan wants to have good relations with the whole world on behalf of the nation. We want to have strong diplomatic relations with all, including the United States. We want to gradually re-establish good relations with the United States in the future.
Meanwhile, Kabul residents expressed a hope for a better future of an independent Afghanistan after the U.S. military completed its withdrawal.
A nation who wants to develop and be self-sufficient must not wait for another state. They must count on their own nation and stand on their own feet to be able to build their country with at least foreign aid. It is not good to have all our eyes on the U.S. I am hopeful that after this, we would have nationwide peace. It is good that the U.S. withdrew from the country. They must let Afghans discuss what they will agree on and how they would form a government. The government must be inclusive, acceptable for Afghanistan. It must not be under the influence of any country, and no foreigner must impose anything onto it. My opinion is that Afghans must be independent and do anything according to their own will.
And prior to a formal withdrawal of all Western troops, Taliban forces clashed with militia fighters in the Panjshir Valley north of Kabul Monday night, losing 8 soldiers. Fahim Dashti, a spokesman for the National Resistance Forces loyal to local leader Ahmad Massoud, said the fighting occurred on the western entrance to the valley, where the Taliban attacked their positions. He said the attack, which may have been a probe to test the valley's defenses, was repulsed with 8 Taliban killed and a similar number wounded, while 2 members of the NRF forces were injured. Massoud, son of a former commander Ahmad Shan Massoud, has established himself in the Panjshir Valley with a force of several thousand, made up of local militias and remnants of our army and special forces units. On the other side, a significant force of Taliban fighters has been moved to the area, but the two sides have so far been engaged in negotiations and have avoided fighting. Since the fall of Kabul on August 15th, Panjshir has been the only province to hold out against the Taliban, although there has also been fighting in neighboring Baghlan province between Taliban and local militia forces. Hospitals in parts of the south of the United States ran out of oxygen supply as COVID-19 cases and hospitalizations continue soaring. The situation is driven by the amount of people who remain unvaccinated and the dangerous coronavirus variant that has infected millions of citizens. According to state health officials and hospital consultants, several hospitals in Florida, South Carolina, Texas, and Louisiana are struggling with oxygen scarcity, and some are at risk of having to use their reserve supply. A risk of running out of oxygen imminently. With a continued uptick in COVID-19 cases, there has been more demand on the oxygen supply, and hospitals cannot keep up the pace to meet those needs. The European Union recommended that there is 27 nations reinstate restrictions on tourists from the United States because of rising coronavirus infections there. The announcement suggested that the vaccinated travelers will still be permitted into EU member countries. It is up to each nation to set their own restrictions. The guidance is not compulsory by law, however, and U.S. travelers should expect a mishmash of travel rules across the continent. The EU has no unified COVID-19 tourism policy, and national governments from the bloc have the authority to decide whether they keep their borders open to North American tourists. Possible restrictions could include quarantines, further testing requirements upon arrival, or even a total ban on all non-essential travel from the U.S. Healthcare workers belonging to the Korean Health and Medical Workers Union in South Korea have overwhelmingly voted to strike, citing overwork and stress, which have been exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic. Workers are demanding improved conditions and plan to work out on September 2nd if their demands are not met. It will be the largest strike of medical workers since 2002 or 4. The union announcement from among the nearly 57,000 union members, more than 45,000 workers took part in a strike authorization vote, with more than 41,000 voting yes. The healthcare workers have put forward 8 demands, including 3 to improve medical conditions and services, and 5 others addressing working conditions. We've come to the end of this news brief. Remember, you can find these and many other stories on our website at TeleSUR English. You can also follow us on social media for all the latest news. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Telegram. For TeleSUR English, I am Ray Gomez. Thank you for watching.